CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten here to run the numbers. All right, Harry, how do Americans feel about the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, if we're talking about adjectives, how about they think it's awful, they think it's horrible, and to quote our colleague Charles Barkley, terrible, terrible, terrible. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at the net favorable rating on the big, beautiful bill. I don't just got one poll for you, Omar. I got 5 of them, and the net favorable rating, minus 19 points, Washington Post, minus 20 points, Pew Research Center, Fox, minus 21, Quinnipiac University, minus 26, KFF, minus 29. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know that when the net favorable rating of your bill is somewhere between minus 19 and minus 29 points, that it is not a positive bill as viewed by the American public. The American public at this particular point hate the big, beautiful bill. As far as they're concerned, it's not a big, beautiful bill. It's a big, bad bill.
I always appreciate when you hold back, Harry.
I know, I try.
As people have learned more about the bill, I mean, obviously we're still in these stages working out individual pieces, and we'll see where this ends up. But as people have learned about it, has that popularity changed at all once they get more details?
No, Omar. You know, we have Quinnipiac University. They hated it in early June when the net favorable rating was minus 26 points. And look at where we are in late June. It's the same, minus 26 points. The more they learn about this bill, they hate it just as much. I've been going through the historical books and trying to find a piece of legislation that looks more likely than not to pass, and seeing if there is one as unpopular as the big, beautiful bill. And the bottom line is, Omar, I can't find one. This one is in the history books, and for all of the wrong reasons as far as the American public is concerned.
So why is this bill so unpopular?
Why is this bill so unpopular? Well, I think Republicans would argue that this bill is supposed to help out the American people and their family. But the American people disagree with that idea. All right, Trump's policies and your family, help or hurt? The big, beautiful bill, just 23% say help. How about 49%? 49% say hurt. Look, that's a 26-point difference in the direction of hurt. Compare that to Trump's first-term agenda, where the plurality said it helped their family at 44% compared to 31% who said hurt. So the American people elected Trump to help them and their families, but they see the big, beautiful bill as one that, on the whole, hurts their families.
All right. Helpful perspective as we work through the individual details of where the Senate negotiations are.
President Donald Trump's sweeping domestic policy bill is inching closer to the finish line. The U.S. Senate adjourned about 3 hours ago after debate on the package of tax cuts and spending priorities. Senators are now bracing for a marathon voting session on amendments, also known as Vote-A-Rama, after they convene at around 9 o'clock in the morning. Several Republicans have raised concerns about the bill's spending levels. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Senate version of the package would cost far more than the House-approved bill, adding more than $3 trillion to the deficit. Amy Kiley is following the latest developments.
By no means is this bill final.
The fate of President Donald Trump's budget bill remains uncertain ahead of today's Vote-A-Rama in the Senate. Democrats are united in opposition.
A handful of billionaires get a big break, while working people lose their Medicaid, while hungry kids lose access to food funding.
Most Republicans are united in support of the bill.
We have before us today a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver legislation to create a safer, stronger, and more prosperous America.
But if more than 3 Republicans oppose the measure, it's likely to fail. Senator Thom Tillis says he'll vote no and retire at the end of his term.
What do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there?
Senator Rand Paul says he voted no to a procedural measure because he thinks the bill would add trillions to the deficit.
That doesn't sound at all conservative to me.
Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski wants carve-outs for her state. Maine Senator Susan Collins is signaling she'll propose an amendment. And Senator Josh Hawley says he'll vote yes, but
we can't be cutting health care for working people and for poor people in order to constantly give special tax treatment to corporations.
I'm Mimi Kiley reporting.
Democrats emphasized the bill would extend 2017 income tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. That's true. And since the cuts are based on percentages, the wealthiest Americans stand to save the most money. And Thomas Gift joins us now from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's the director for the Center on U.S. Politics at the University College London. Thomas, there's been a lot of arm twisting and backroom negotiations and even a last-minute accounting gimmick from the Republicans to try to get this bill through. And all of that, ironically, for a bill that the public largely doesn't want. I mean, this is an unpopular bill. Tell us why.
Well, it's great to be with you, MJ. Thanks so much for having me. You're right that Republicans in Congress are eager to hand Trump a legislative win with this big, beautiful bill, but they are running into stiff resistance from the public. You know, polls from Pew, from Quinnipiac, the Washington Post, they all show that fewer than 30% of voters support the bill in its current form. And I think that that suggests either a failure by Trump and the GOP to effectively pitch the package, or that voters just don't like what's on offer. And I think that that's more likely. You know, one area where Democrats really have landed their message is on proposed cuts to Medicaid and food assistance. They frame them as draconian, especially for low-income Americans, including many in Trump's base. Republicans have essentially countered by saying this isn't going to affect most Americans. It's only those who aren't working and are able-bodied. But you're absolutely right. You know, Democrats, I think, have won the political argument, at least so far.
And do you see the main rift within the Republican Party right now as being between the fiscal hawks versus the fiscal doves? Or is it more accurate to say, you know, as with so many things in Washington right now, that it's more about getting in line behind President Donald Trump versus standing up to him?
Well, I think it's a combination. You really laid that out well. The big, beautiful bill is revealing a deeper identity crisis within the Republican Party. You know, fiscal conservatives still argue that this bill doesn't go far enough in slashing spending. The CBO said it will add $3.3 trillion to federal deficits over the next decade. Senator Rand Paul has warned of blowback if deeper cuts aren't made. And I think that that puts Republicans, and particularly Trump Republicans, in a bind because they spent so much time under the Biden years preaching fiscal restraint, and now they risk looking hypocritical. At the same time, you know, GOP senators are facing backlash over the bill's impact on entitlements. A CBO analysis found that the poorest households could lose around $1,600 a year due to cuts in Medicaid and food stamps. So that's an enormous hit for some voters. And again, many of these voters are Trump voters.
And I want to talk to you about Thom Tillis. He is, of course, the Republican senator from North Carolina who came out against this bill. That angered President Trump so much that the president threatened to back a primary challenger to Senator Tillis. And then Tillis announced that he's retiring. I mean, if you are a politically vulnerable Republican right now, what lesson do you take away from that?
Well, the lesson is you get in line or you end up not in Washington anymore. Trump is really going to step in as the GOP's closer, I think, in the next 24 hours. And that certainly means pressuring party leaders and rank and file senators with a very clear message, which is either back the bill, or we're going to primary you into oblivion. I think the pressure is very similar to what we saw Trump exert during his cabinet picks when he elevated figures like Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel. Some people said this can't be done. Trump comes in, makes some vote calls. All of a sudden, it's a done deal. So Trump isn't in his honeymoon anymore, and his leverage isn't unlimited, but no one else commands the kind of loyalty of the GOP base like he does. So you can definitely be assured that Trump is going all in, making phone calls over the next day.
And if this bill were to pass, and we're going to watch how things unfold on Capitol Hill in the coming hours, but if it were to pass, how do you think Republicans will contend with and message the steep cuts to Medicaid and food programs that have been quite controversial?
I think it's going to be a real challenge for Republicans as a result. And I think Democrats are certainly going to campaign on some of these cuts in the 2026 midterms. I think Republicans have made a number of 11th hour changes to help win over GOP holdouts and also to try to sort of blunt some of the more negative impacts of this bill. One's a $25 billion relief fund for rural hospitals, increase in the SALT cap to $40,000, the delay of a Medicaid provider tax, the addition of SNAP waivers for Alaska and Hawaii, new requirements for wind and solar projects, but that's not going to entirely appease the Republican electorate who don't like this bill.
All right, Thomas Giff, thank you so much for joining us.